I experienced a sketchy situation on Halloween a couple years ago. My cousin came over for Halloween that year just to go trick-or-treating. I was 15 at the time, and I know that's a bit old for trick-or-treating, but hey, it's free candy. My cousin was also 15, and we were planning on taking it easy that Halloween and just hitting enough houses to make a reasonable haul before we went home. My friend and his younger brother went with us, but we eventually went our separate ways. It was pretty busy, and there was a whole lot of kids at every house with decorations up. My cousin Jack and I decided to hit some of the houses with lights on with no kids already on the front stoops. Lots of houses that we had already hit before that had no decorations up and had lights on all had people inside ready to deliver candy to trick-or-treaters. But all the other kids I know for a fact target the heavily decorated houses. We ended up getting through like 4 houses in a minute because of no lineups. The next house in the line was not decorated at all, but there was a light on, so we thought we'd give it a shot. We knocked on the door and immediately an older man opened the door. He opened it completely, which revealed 5 other guys just standing there. They were much younger than the older man who opened the door. I'm guessing they were in their late 30s, while the older man who opened the door was in his early 50s. He held out a bowl of candy, then reached in and grabbed some and put it in each of our bags. The older man asked Jack what his name was, and Jack responded to his question using a fake name. Jack said bye before the older man could say anything else. We walked off the front stoop, and alarms immediately started going off in my head. Jack seemed alarmed as well, and we started talking about how sketchy that was. Why were there 6 guys right there when we opened the door? Why were they all acting so strange? Those were the questions that were floating around in my head. Jack and I were a little spooked because of how weird that was. We went to 2 more houses, then we started walking to my house. Jack and I glanced back at that house to see a car pulling out of the driveway. The car drove up the way we were walking and started slowing down right next to us. The roads were clear, and all the trick-or-treaters were on the sidewalks, so there should have been no reason the car slowed down right next to us. We picked up the pace a bit, and that's when another car sped up behind them, eventually beginning to go the same pace as the first car. I recognized the guy driving the first car, and the guy driving the second car. The guy driving the first car was the older guy who gave us the candy, and the driver in the second car was one of the 5 guys just standing there suspiciously. There was also somebody in the passenger seat in the first car, but all I could see was the silhouette of the person. When Jack and I were 2 houses away from my house, we saw the first car park right across the street from my house. We didn't even see where the second car went, we just bolted back inside my house. Our parents, who were sitting in the living room talking, asked us what was wrong. We told them the whole story, and when we were finished, we went to the window to check if that car was still parked across the street, and it was. But then 5 seconds after I checked, it drove off. It had probably been parked there for the 5 minutes since we went inside my house. My mom and Jack's mom wanted Jack and I to go show our dads the house where all those guys were in. But eventually, our parents calmed us down and told us it was just a Halloween gag or something. Though I have my own theory on what was going on. The reason why there were 6 guys in the main doorway was because when a lone trick-or-treater or group of trick-or-treaters much younger than Jack and I came to the door, they were looking to jump or snatch them. But when they saw that Jack and I were teenagers and literally the same height as them, they decided to play it cool, even though they still looked sketchy. And why they were following us in their cars, we will never know. But when the night ended and everyone was off to bed, I realized that house is only 1 block from my house. This was many years ago. My old buddy Anthony and I were getting on our costumes to go trick-or-treating. We started going house to house just like a normal night. We got to the old part of our neighborhood, where our parents would tell us not to go because we were only 12 years old and we didn't know our way around there. We walked up to the first house there, and a nice lady opened the door who gave us big Hershey bars. After that, while we were walking to literally only the second house in this part of the neighborhood, this random guy came screaming and running towards us down the street. He came out from behind a church. We thought it was just a Halloween prank at first, like anyone would, so we stood there just laughing. But as soon as he got up to us, he tried taking the pillowcase full of candy out of my hands, so my buddy Anthony started hitting him with his pillowcase. By the time we got to this old neighborhood, we had a lot of candy, so being hit with that pillowcase surely had to hurt. Anthony was hitting him until he let go of the pillowcase and started running away. We thought that was the end of him, until we started walking back, extremely shocked and confused. I called my mom and asked her if she could pick us up because we were pretty far from home, and that whole experience kind of made us want to get off the streets. As soon as she got to our location, we explained what happened, and she almost didn't believe us. That's how ridiculous it sounded. We got home around 10 p.m., and shortly after that, there was a knock at the front door. My dad figured it was just a late-night trick-or-treater, so we went to answer the door, and standing there was a man in a jumpsuit with a Michael Myers mask. My dad was confused because he was wondering what he was doing out alone trick-or-treating, and based on his height and build, he looked like an older man, not a kid or a teenager. Either way, my dad just gave him candy and didn't really care to say anything. But while Anthony and I were sitting on the couch, we noticed him staring at us, like his masked face was staring right at us in the living room. I felt slightly unsettled by it and was waiting for him to just turn and leave. My dad ended up shutting the door in his face when he wouldn't walk away. So fast forward to like 1 in the morning. We were about to go to bed, but on our way upstairs, we heard a knock at the door. There was no way I was opening the door at that hour, and I knew this couldn't be anything good this late. So I went to tell my dad there was a knock at the door, and he said just ignore it. So Anthony and I go up to the room and turn on a movie. Anthony heard something though, and told me to mute the TV, and when I did, I heard it too. It was the sound of leaves crackling in the backyard. I looked in the backyard, and I saw that man in the Michael Myers costume, swinging on the swing set in our yard, staring into my bedroom window. I felt like my heart jumped out of my chest and up into my throat. It's like he was purposely recreating a scene from a horror movie to scare us. I ran into my dad's room and told him that the man in the Michael Myers costume was on our swing set. He took on this expression of shock and concern just like ours, and he looked outside, but he didn't see anyone there. Then, right when we were looking, we heard a knock at the back door. My dad went downstairs to the door, but nobody was there. This man was toying with us, harassing us to scare us. It had to be a Halloween prank. My dad was equally concerned now. All of a sudden, I heard my mom scream in the other room. So Anthony, my dad, and I ran upstairs to see the man in the Michael Myers costume standing at the end of the bed staring at my mom. My dad told Anthony and I to run and call the police. My friend and I ran downstairs and grabbed the nearest phone. We called 911 and told them that a man dressed as Michael Myers had broken into our house. The operator asked if everyone was all right. I said he's upstairs, and my dad has him, but we needed cops immediately. She told me to stay on the phone and that police were en route to the house. From upstairs, there was the sound of my dad screaming, followed by their sliding window being pushed open. The two of us ran upstairs to see my mom and dad laying on the floor. My mom was crying, and my dad's nose was bleeding. My dad said the man jumped out through the window. When the police arrived, Anthony, my dad, and I told them everything we could. They did a sweep of the property inside and out, which took about 20 minutes, and the premises was clear. I think that might have been my last year trick-or-treating, and for good reason. I still wonder if the man that tried to take my candy was the man wearing the Michael Myers costume, and I deeply regret leaving that part out of the story we gave to the police. Halloween was always one of my least favorite days of the year. I never had a lot of friends in middle school or high school, so I never really had any plans on Halloween. In middle school, I didn't really go trick-or-treating, and in high school, I never really went to any Halloween parties. This was also at a time when my sister was away at college, so due to the fact that my parents were hardly ever home, I'd usually be home alone. This was one of many Halloween nights that I was left home alone. Halloween was on a Friday this particular year, so kids were out in droves and later than usual. My parents were gone for the week. My mom left a bunch of bags of candy for me to hand to kids. I got kind of sick of the doorbell ringing every 5 minutes all day, so eventually I just poured an entire bag of candies into a plastic bowl we had in one of the kitchen cabinets. My mom never really liked leaving a bowl on the stoop, but she wasn't there, so what was she gonna do? That lasted a good while because the constant ringing of the doorbell stopped for a couple hours at least, and when the bowl was empty, I refilled it. I wasn't expecting to hear the doorbell again the rest of the night because even if the bowl were emptied, I assumed people would know not to bother ringing the bell at a house with an empty bowl. So when the bell did ring again, I was not only surprised, but also felt a hint of annoyance. I ignored the first ring, but about 30 seconds later, there was another ring. This time I got up from my computer, pausing the game I was playing, and went down to check who was at the front door. I opened the door, and there were two guys in white vendetta masks holding small plastic bags with very minimal candy inside, it seemed. Neither of the two of them said trick or treat. They just ominously both stood there, and then lifted up their bags and held them open. I said, "Hang on, I'll get more candy." I felt intimidated, if I'm being honest. I went to get the bag of Reese's and grabbed a few to put in their bags. When I dropped the candies in their plastic bags, one of them, I don't know which, asked in a monotone voice, "Are you home alone?" I said no, but with a stutter because the question scared me. I said, "My parents are here." Then I said, "Have a good night," and shut the door. I waited by the door listening to see if I'd hear them walk down the steps. I finally heard footsteps leaving, so I felt relieved and started going back upstairs. But that question, "Am I home alone?" kept haunting me. I couldn't just go back to my game after hearing that. And then I realized the possibility as to why they would have asked me that, because there were no cars at all in the driveway or in front of the house, yet the lights were on. Then when I, an at the time 14-year-old kid, opened the door, I probably looked like the easiest target ever. My paranoia was clearly justified though, because while sitting at my desk trying to get back into my game, I heard this loud bang from my window. I was on the second floor, so clearly something was just thrown at the window. My heart started to pound the inside of my chest again. In response, I turned off the computer screen and desk lamp to bring darkness into the room. I then looked out the window, and though I couldn't see anything out there because it was too dark, another object was thrown at the window right in front of me, this one scaring me even more than the last. It sounded like a rock. I instantly felt this intensifying sense of danger. I ducked back down behind the window and left my bedroom. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, only an iPod Touch, so I had to get to the kitchen house phone. I crawled my way down the stairs so not to be seen through any of the windows. I got to the kitchen phone and dialed 911, but I think they saw even just the light from the little screen of the phone, because there was suddenly an aggressive banging on one of the kitchen windows. By now I was on the phone with 911 begging for help. As I crouch walked out of the kitchen and towards the back door, I screamed, realizing there was one of the guys in the vendetta masks on the other side of the back door, trying to open it. I started screaming into the phone for help, but around the same time, a familiar voice was calling from the other side of the front door. It was our next door neighbor, Chris. I rushed to answer the door and he came in, clearly happy to see I was okay. He took the phone from me and spoke to the police for me. He saw the two masked men enter my backyard from his kitchen window and saw them throwing multiple things at the windows of the house. By the time any police officers arrived at the house, those two masked men clearly knew better than to have stuck around. Chris invited me to sleep at his place for the night just to be safe. He was good friends with my dad before he moved, so he really didn't mind helping me. Having good relations with your neighbors may just save your life one day, you never know. What I do know is this experience made me hate Halloween just that much more.